Great. Thank you, everyone, and to the Dean and Chancellor for being here today. It's a really exciting time and next chapter for innovations at CU Anschutz. Our why and mission, we're really a discovery powerhouse with over 3,000 publications annually and 3,500 active clinical trials and exciting healthcare ideas that emerge from countless conversations here on campus. We're launching this initiative to really support you and turn that excitement into real-world products that change lives. We're going to do that by investing in our people and not just one-off technologies, opening up more pathways to commercialization. It's not just startups, and really enhancing our industry and investor partnerships. HIE Impact is your front door to CU innovations, providing all the resources and tools that you need to advance your ideas and research to the next level. I'd like to hand it over now to Dean Sampson to give a quick overview and highlights from his perspective.
Golly, thanks to you and to your team. I wanted to make this introduction a little bit personal in the sense that when I arrived here about a year ago, I guess almost 15 months ago now, within a few months of arriving, I had the courage to ask the Chancellor why I got the position and what he wanted me to do in this position. And what he told me after he gave it some thought was to take risk. And I think that's uncomfortable for many academicians, and it's uncomfortable in a way to do that on an academic medical campus, no matter how good they are, no matter how much of we value and support entrepreneurship. I think what this program does is it takes away that discomfort, and it takes an unfamiliar path to many of us who maybe are extraordinary scientists or clinicians, but not familiar with the rules of the road for entrepreneurship, and allows that path to become more familiar by having a group of people that are literally going to help you walk down that path. I think this program is extraordinarily robust, and I see this as a service to all of our faculty, and I hope all of you will as well. And with that, I'll hand it over to Don.
Thank you both to Gali and to Dean Sampson. And John and I literally did start talking about this when he first got here. CU Innovations was set up initially to foster this kind of activity, and it kind of morphed over time into being an organization that focused on fewer very high impact possibilities. And what we realized after a while was that we were missing part of our original mission, which was to go back and really be a support operation to help you as PIs move your ideas forward and move toward the possibility, however real, of commercialization, of actually taking things off the bench and into the bedside. And I think that what this program is designed to do is to enable you to have the support that you need to do just that, to begin to move ideas forward. And I think it's a program we've been thinking about for a long time. Many people have contributed to its development, and I'm really excited about the possibilities that could come out of it, both for you as individuals and frankly for the institution as a whole. Innovation and collaboration are absolutely critical to the future of this campus, and I think the future of academic medicine. And I think that this program is an example of or an avenue to help us move that forward. There are plenty of examples of how it's worked. If you're my age, you will have had a shingle shot at some point in time. Not very many people realize that every time you get one of those shots, you're benefiting from IP that was developed at the University of Colorado. So it's a game that we know that we believe in, that we want to support, and that's what this program is really designed to do. So I'm thrilled that it's getting launched. I'm thrilled that Gali and his team are going to lead this and lead us in it, and I'm really looking forward to what will come out of it over the years ahead. So with that, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to Gali.
Great. Thanks to you, Dean Sampson and Chancellor Elliman. We'll go on to just a high-level overview of what the HIE Impact program will accomplish on the campus. And really, we'd like to start with a story around Shingrix. It is available And it's a vaccine that's 95% effective at preventing shingles and post-herpetic neuralgia, approved by the FDA in 2017. This was developed here on the campus a number of years ago. And to date, we're estimating 144 million patients have been dosed with the shingles vaccine. By our calculations, because it's so effective, we estimate that this has prevented over 500,000 hospitalizations and saved over 2,000 lives. This is an example of what high impact looks like. October is actually the 8th anniversary of the approval for Shingrix. And we also have a video released today to celebrate the immunology innovation legacy here at CU, as we look forward to the next generation of building on these innovations. One of the biggest questions that we've been asked about the high impact program is how it's differentiated from previous offerings at CU Innovations. We've expanded support to the business of science for more early stage innovators who may simply have an idea or a question, which helps you determine if your idea is viable for commercialization and to iterate and pivot fast, fail faster to get it to the right solution for the market. We've also expanded our later stage development support with more resources and funding opportunities for the highest potential, most de-risked technologies. We've also expanded on our heritage offerings. This is the middle section here in green, enhancing support for more pathways to commercialization, continuing marquee programs like Spark Colorado, and expanding opportunities to connect with industry, mentors, subject matter experts for full coverage support. High Impact offers a concierge style support for each phase of your journey, no matter where you're at. These are some of the core high initiative programs, tools, and resources that will be new for the campus and that we'll be launching in the coming year. We created HIE based on numerous discovery interviews with faculty, staff, chairs, students, and industry mentors. And we're tailoring our offerings based on those key findings. We're focusing on investing in and developing our people, not one-off technologies, progressively increasing our bets and trying to optimize the use of our resources to advance projects through the pipeline. 3 different key areas are the business of science around education and training, a self-paced educational training series, pathways and identifying idea navigators, ways in which we can engage with the office up front, and also partnerships with industry mentors and entrepreneurs in residence. One of the exciting things that we're launching as well in connection with this effort is a champions program. So we often receive questions around who do I go to get involved? When do I get involved? As part of HIE, this new High Impact Champions program with nominated champions from each shareholder department have been created to support you in these journeys. And we also want to recognize a number of different groups here on campus that help launch this high impact initiative, from support in the Department of Dermatology, Department of Medicine, Department of Neurosurgery, Ophthalmology, Pharmaceutical Sciences, Surgery, Emergency Medicine, otolaryngology, Orthopedics, the School of Medicine, as well as the Chancellor himself. All these different groups are supporting this effort to make it a reality for the campus. These champions will be your boots on the ground, a first line of defense to help you sift through innovations work and provide their own examples of the journey. They will have regular meetings with our leadership team and be up to date on the latest resources and trainings to help keep your team informed. So you can certainly reach out to them as an initial resource. We also recognize that the avenues for unlocking patient impact and developing products for patients are numerous. As we think about your journey in these efforts, we want to meet you where you're at and keep your goals in consideration. There are lots of different activities and considerations around role intensity, economics, your risk appetite, and control for where your innovation goes. If you want to remain a full-time clinician, it may be best to pursue things like licensing or partnerships or consulting pathways. From your feedback, we know it's important to have options depending on your clinical practice, your career goals, and to have a say in how your work reaches patients and ultimately unlocks patient impact. With an awareness of where you want to go and the pathways it takes to get there, the High Impact Initiative aims to give you the tools to become competitive in this rapidly changing world, no matter where you want to go. Coming up next, we're excited to bring you a fantastic innovator panel that exemplifies some of these different pathways. Before we switch over, I want to thank again all the different departments and schools and really the campus. Because of your support, we're able to give our faculty these tools to thrive even in the most challenging environments, which sets CU Anschutz up to be a leader on the national level for years to come. So as we get started, perhaps we can go around the group. We have Dave Westerly, Malik Kahook, and Cathy Bodine to talk about their innovations and their pathways. So as we get started, perhaps we can go through the list and name yourself, your title, your innovation that you've been working on, and the pathway in which you took to get there. Dave, let's start with you.
Great, thanks so much, Golly, and thank you all for inviting me to be part of this panel. So my name is David Westerly. I am a medical physicist by training, and I'm an associate professor in radiation oncology. I'm also a co-founder and CEO of OncoPatch, which is a medical technology and services company. We're focused on developing a non-invasive treatment for skin cancer that uses patches that contain the radioisotope yttrium-90. And these patches provide a different type of radiotherapy that's less penetrating. It spares more normal tissue that's located behind the skin cancer, and that enables us to deliver these treatments in fewer sessions. So instead of maybe 15 or 20 treatments, we can do as little as 1 treatment, maybe 3 treatments. And so that's what we've been working on.
Thanks, David. Cathy, let's go to you next.
Thank you, Golly. Hi, I'm Cathy Bodine. I'm a professor in the Department of Bioengineering with joint appointments across the School of Medicine. I'm the executive director of the Coleman Institute for Cognitive Technologies at the CU system level, and I'm the director of the Center for Innovative Design and Engineering, as well as the director for the Innovation Ecosystems for the Colorado Clinical Translational Sciences Institute. I joke that the longer you stay here, the more titles you get. But my innovation, I'm a little bit of a round peg in a square hole, but I think I'm a good example of how CU Innovations has been so incredibly supportive. I'm working on a project that I call the Sexy Walker. That's our nickname for it. But basically what we know is there's almost 100 million older adults worldwide right now. And that figure is going to more than double by 2050 to 2.1 billion older adults around the world. And as we all know, as we get older, things change, and particularly our mobility changes. But we also know that almost 50% of older adults reject their walker if they're prescribed one on day 1. So we did a lot of work to figure out why. And it turns out 3rd grade never dies. Stigma. People do not want to look old. They don't want to look feeble. They didn't have any choice in the matter. They're not happy. So we have partnered with a company called Thought Forward Design and Pininfarina. And if you don't know who Pininfarina happens to be, they are a design firm that designs things like Ferrari cars. And so we have brought them on board to innovate with us and create an aesthetically beautiful walker that is foldable and stowable in an overhead bin, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're moving forward with that right now. And I'll stop there.
Great, thanks, Cathy. I'll switch over to Malik.
Hey, thanks for having me. Malik Kahook, professor of ophthalmology, and I'm vice chair for translational research. You asked a question about the innovation pathway. I've been in the university for about 20 years, and I think I've taken every pathway possible in the innovation pathway. So I'm happy to go into a little bit more depth, maybe during the Q&A. I've had the good fortune of licensing out devices, including a minimally invasive device for glaucoma that was licensed about 10 years ago with a partner called New World Medical. That quickly grew into the 2nd most common procedure done for glaucoma patients, and it's marketed globally now. I've also partnered with incubators that have licensed technology and then formed companies around that technology, one of which was Claire Vista Medical, which was acquired by Alcon in 2017. And more recently, a company called Spyglass Pharma, which is a spin out from the university that now resides in Orange County, that has a significant amount of funding from venture capital. We're currently in our phase 3. That device is a long-term drug delivery device that is done at the time of cataract surgery and delivers drug for a period of 3 years to treat glaucoma. So I'm happy to talk about any of those pathways during the question and answer or during the exchange that we have. But I've pretty much worn every hat, I think, in the innovation pathway, and I'm happy to share all the scars and the learnings along the way.
Great. So let's start with a couple of core questions. And for those that are in the audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the Q&A, and we'll try to address them live or after the seminar if we don't get to them. So Malik, let's go back to you. Where are you currently in your innovator journey, and how has CU Innovation supported that effort?
So the innovation journey is interesting when you're doing a lot of different things because we have many different projects and each one is at a different phase. I'll tell you the one, if I can just focus on one, Spyglass Pharma, as I just mentioned. We spun out Spyglass Pharma from the university about 6 years ago. And we went through all of the steps through preclinical testing, just recently completed our phase 1/2 study, and we just initiated our phase 3 study. So from an innovation pathway, this has been a tremendous learning opportunity. When we started the company, we started it with significant venture capital funding and formed a team of around 6 people. We're now close to 60 people in the company. So it just gives you an idea of how much growth and learning that happens along the way. I know we have a lot of clinicians that are listening in. And one thing I just want to emphasize is this is not something they teach you in medical school. I remember when I first heard the letters NDA, I had to go look it up. I didn't know what an NDA was, going back 20 years. So from an innovation pathway, I would describe myself as a learner. It's a constant learner, just trying to figure out some of the things that are coming up on my radar and how to navigate it. From a CU innovation standpoint and from an HIE or HIE standpoint, what I'm looking forward to from HIE Impact is a support system that has changed significantly over the last 20 years. And I'll get into that maybe a little bit later in the back and forth, but the change in the ecosystem on campus from where it was 20 years ago when I joined the university to where it is today is just, it's night and day. So the support that we had initially, I think, was pretty rudimentary. We didn't have a roadmap. We had to create the roadmap. And now what HIE Impact is doing is basically creating that roadmap so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, if you will, when you're starting out. So I'd love to get into that when we get into a little bit more detail.
Great. Cathy, let's go to you next. Where are you in your innovator journey?
Well, thank you. I think I like Malik. If you worked with the old technology transfer office and you work with you guys today, it's a whole new game and it's really exciting. But as far as the innovation I'm focusing on today, the Skywalker is actually the official name for my Sexy Walker project. We're very early stage, but I think it's really important to point out that while right now we do have Spark funding, and so we're really engaged in all of the work that's involved in Spark funding, which comes through CEU and the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. I have relied on CU Innovations for years, and like Malik, having that support structure and a place to go just to ask a question is critical. I think that internal support is available to us, and I think a lot of faculty, that isn't their first thought to go to this program. And so I think making it more visible and doing things like we're doing today is really, you're going to be inundated, golly. But I think that's a good thing. I've had everything from business advice. I've had consultations on a multitude of projects over the years. With the Spark program, one of the things I love the most is the external advisors that are assigned to you with this program. So you're talking to real people with real industry experience, and you can balance that because we don't learn this stuff when we go to school, and it's a learning phase the whole time. And so it's really exciting. So yeah, that's where we are now. We hope we have a goal of being to commercialization in 12 to 18 months. So many milestones to accomplish.
Great. David?
Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear some of the other experiences too. So I mentioned we have a startup company for our technology that we spun out in 2023. So Uncle Patch, that's actually a partnership that was between CU and the Colorado School of Mines, and so we have kind of our own interesting angle to that. But at this point, so we're actually seeking 510(k) clearance from the FDA for our device. We're also raising our first round of capital, and so we're also aiming towards commercialization in the next 12 months, let's say. And so it is something that CU Innovations has played a big role in that, especially this project really from the beginning. Some of our first capital was actually from a Spark grant in 2022. And one of the great things about Spark funding is it allows you to explore things that you can't traditionally do with NIH or NSF grants. So there's, I mean, OncoPatch is a bit of a complicated business model for sure. Any type of radiotherapy product has a few extra layers of regulatory burden or oversight, let's say. And so it's something that having that Spark funding really enabled us to reach out to a multitude of consultants, experts. Again, the strategic advisors that we were assigned through CU Innovations to work with us have just proven to be invaluable. And so it's something that, you know, the progress that we've made over the last 5 years really wouldn't have been possible, but without the infrastructure that's being developed and now is culminating in this HIE program here at CU.
Great, thanks. I'd love to switch gears a little bit and talk about how this innovation activity maybe integrates or challenges some of the work that you're doing on the research and your personal career goals. I have a couple of different questions for each of you that sort of elicits kind of these thoughts. Maybe we'll go back to Malik. For you, how would the HIE Impact program have changed your experience from when you started? And why should faculty and students get involved now?
So it would have been a dream come true if we had something like HIE Impact when I first started out. And there are a few things that I can think of that would have been beneficial. And I mentioned one of them before, and that's the roadmap. When you first start out with a medical device, let's say, you can think of it while you're in the operating room. And then as a physician who's not trained in this, you walk out of the operating room, go to your office and say, well, where do I start? And I think having the resources to say, okay, here's who you talk to, here's how you vet the idea, here's how you do market research, here's how you file for a patent, here's how you go after funding, all of these steps that we just don't understand as physicians. I would say most physicians don't understand that. Just having that roadmap would have been huge for me. And I would have saved probably 2 or 3 years with my initial projects. The other thing is mitigating mistakes. There are a lot of mistakes that happen, and we learn from our mistakes. But we don't have to make all of the mistakes and learn from all of those mistakes if they're not necessary. And one big thing is just filing for a patent. What does the patent look like? How much depth to go into? What's the timing? All of those things we're not trained in. And I think having the assistance that we have now in navigating that is tremendously helpful. And the last point that I'll make about this is the network effect that happens that you just don't have when you're first starting out. That's probably the biggest part of this answer. It took me about 10 years to meet all of the industry members, all of the consultants that are out there, to know who to go to from an FDA standpoint for an FDA consultant. All of that required going to meetings, shaking hands, going out to dinners, making sure that I made the effort to travel and understand what the ecosystem looked like. That was hard-earned and very beneficial today because I know who to call, when to call them. I know who to call for financing. I have a Rolodex of venture capitalists that I can reach out to. I think the HIE Impact program will assist and cut down the time on just the network effect, because there's a network that's on campus that also has tentacles outside of campus, and that would have been tremendously helpful. The second part of your question is, how can students and faculty think of this? I think the first step is to meet with you and meet with the rest of the team if you have an idea, or even if you're just contemplating that you might want to navigate that type of flex that side of your brain and do that as part of your career. Just understanding what resources are there. That's where I would start. Learn how to speak the language, contact people like me and the others that are on the panel through email and ask some questions, and then get a firm understanding of what it takes. The commitment that it takes to do this along with your clinical work is very, very difficult. It's really hard to balance all of these things. So talk to the clinicians who are doing it, talk to the CU Innovations team, and get an understanding of what resources are there. And I think that's a really good place to start for faculty and for students.
Great. That's a great segue to Cathy. If you could tell us how industry collaborations really enrich the academic experience. How has that influenced your work?
Yeah, I have to say that these industry relationships are vital to everything I do. Many years ago, prior to coming to CU, I actually worked in industry, and I am so grateful for the lessons I learned before I came here. Once I got in academia, I realized at that time, there was this massive disconnect between academia and industry in terms of faculty thinking that it was bad to reach out to industry. It wasn't ethical. And of course it is. The thing that is so important to understand is there's such a it's a symbiotic relationship between academic innovation and industry. We need each other for a lot of reasons. Because that helps us to perform at our best. It doesn't matter how good our idea is if it doesn't get to our patients. And I've always worked with very complex patients with technology needs. And many years ago, I had a little quote that was on my computer, and it basically said that assistive technology isn't a religious experience, it is a business. And I've never walked away from that, because by engaging with industry partners, you understand the intricacies that are involved not only in getting a product to market, but also in sustaining a product. If it doesn't sell, there's a problem, right? And so when we try to take a product to industry, I think what it really gives us is a massive test bed to really measure the impact of our research and our development work, and to understand what's really happening with our patients at the end of the day. So to me, that is just integral in everything I do. And I think also I want to point out the academic and industry connections I've had. I have sent so many students to jobs that they absolutely love because they had that opportunity to engage with industry in some form or fashion. And I think that can't be overlooked.
Great. Thanks, Cathy. And for Dave, along your journey, what's one unexpected thing that you've learned in this process, and how has that affected your research and career goals?
Yeah, so I think there were a number of different ones that kind of come to mind around that. So I think probably the biggest one has to do with talk to customers, talk to end users of your technology, and do that early, sooner rather than later. I think my experience, it's very easy to get focused on something that's within my space, my my research focus, and I start developing a tool or a device or something that I think is great. I think it solves a problem. I think everybody else is going to think it's great, right? And then what ends up happening, I invest a lot of time, and I've built a hammer, and now I'm looking for nails, right? Whereas it's really important to reach out to the people, especially if you're considering an entrepreneurial path, to reach out to people and see, do they think it's great? Are they interested in using it? And even more important, if you're interested in building a business around it, would they actually pay you for it? Because I've definitely learned this in previous startups, that it doesn't really matter how cool your tech is if nobody else wants it, and if people aren't willing to buy it, right? It's not going to be a great business, and then that also limits its ability to get out there and have that impact. So yeah, that's what I would say. That's that's one that I try to always start now. When I have a new idea, I really start focusing on, okay, who's going to use it? And then I seek those people out, because I want to get their unbiased opinion. How would they solve that problem, and is there a good fit there?
Great. We'll pull a question from the audience chat here. Today, there was some news, unfortunately, that the government went into a shutdown with potential risks on withholding of federal dollars on the grant side. How do you see this as impacting research and development efforts? And what happens if there's no money left? How will science continue with no money?
No money, no science. And I think that's the easiest way to put it. It's unfortunate what we're seeing. My son, before he went to school today, was on his iPad, and he saw the news and he freaked out. He didn't know. He thought the whole country was going to shut down. So it's affecting all levels of society, and it certainly affects us as researchers and academicians. There are two sides to this, right? So there's the basic side that happens with funding on campus that is necessary, and hopefully everybody's calling their representatives and shouting at the top of their lungs about this. Now, fortunately, once things spin out, venture capital is a different animal and the funding comes from a different place. So our work in Spyglass won't be affected. We have venture capital money that isn't affected immediately or directly by the shutdown of the government. But I think it's something we should keep on our radar as part of the, the CU campus, understanding that even if you're not somebody who participates in research, the ecosystem is affected when we lose the funding. And if that continues for an extended period of time, if it goes longer than the last one, which lasted 35 days, it can certainly affect everybody on campus. So just keep your eyes focused on this and do what you can as far as getting your representatives to do the right thing.
I think it's also important to consider too diversification of funding resources, and all these different pathways are a way to try to achieve that beyond just grants, and looking at ways to collaborate with industry and beyond. To your point with venture capital as well. Cathy, Dave, do you have any thoughts on sort of the government shutdown?
I have a little bit of a thought. I think this is interesting. As Gali knows, we have a NIH grant that has a fundable score, et cetera, et cetera. So we're waiting. And so we heard from the project officer yesterday, who basically said in a very polite, beautiful way, check back in 4 to 6 weeks. We'll have news for you then. And so I kind of want to give a shout out to those folks at NIH. They're in a very tough environment. And they are being so ingenious. And yes, I know we're losing funds. And yes, I know there are bad things happening, but they are working so hard to expend the dollars they have as of yesterday to keep this going into the future. So I have to give a shout out. And I think they're being very strategic internally, maybe just very quietly, but they're doing it. And I think that's important. But yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, I will just say, I mean, it's a very direct impact, I suppose. So we've submitted our 510K application, pre-market notification, and so we got our 60-day feedback last week, and so we're working to schedule a clarification meeting, which you have 10 days to request that. And so supposedly it's next week, but right. So I mean, it's a very direct impact in that case. But honestly, it's entrepreneurship. It involves a lot of you have to be dynamic, you have to be flexible, you have to be able to pivot and try to, kind of roll with this type of thing. And so it's something we're just grateful we got that feedback before the shutdown, and so now we're able to use this time to try to address the things that they've pointed out. And when we do actually have that meeting, we're going to be in a stronger position. So I mean, it's one of those things you can't control certain things. This is definitely one of them. But yeah, it is a challenge, and yeah, it does have impacts up and down the system for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the pathways that we identified up front is the pivot pathway. And sometimes we need to find a different avenue or path. And I think this sets up the question around setbacks and challenges. And this is just one example of the way to navigate to patient impact and create a product. It's not always a clear and easy path. So we'd love to ask the group, what other setbacks have you encountered along the way of trying to create patient impact? And ultimately, what did you learn from that experience? And what did you do next? Malik, let's go to you.
So we could do 3 webinars on setbacks, and each one would be more sad than the one before it. But one thing that comes to mind is part of a talk that I give on innovation, and that is when you're forming a company or starting an early project, the people that you surround yourself with are extremely important. I'm not going to say they're family, but it's similar to family. And some mistakes that I've made in the past was to bring leadership in early on to get a project moving without maybe taking the proper time. And I think that's a really important point. So you'll see a lot of faculty members take on leadership roles, but then they're doing their clinic, they're doing other things, and they get really busy. So when you bring in somebody, and I've done this twice over the last 20 years, and you identify that they're not the right fit, you should make the change right away. And that's where the ecosystem comes into play that CU Innovations will bring to the table. because you can meet with people on campus who have a network of their own and start to vet people. What I found works for me the best is to go to people that I've worked with over the last 20 years, people that I know, that I've been to dinner with multiple times. I know their families. And that becomes a super important part of making a company successful, is to put a CEO or a leadership person at the helm who is the right person. And again, a mistake is not making that change as fast as identifying that a change is needed. Once you identify that the change is needed, and just make that decision and move forward.
Great. We'll switch the order. Go to David next.
Yeah, it's yeah, setbacks. There's it's hard to pick out kind of the key pivots. I mean, we've had a number of them as well. I think well, when we started out, we were using like there's technology setbacks, right? And I think actually we had this conversation, Golly, that so much of what you do along this path is trying to de-risk these different buckets. And so you've got technology risk, you've got reimbursement risk, you've got market risk, regulatory risk, and then the team and operations. And so our technology was pretty critically dependent on a calibration procedure that was very specific to the isotope we were using. And in fact, when we started, we were using something completely different. We were using a holmium patch, and most people have never heard of holmium, but it's a different isotope that is potentially useful for this. And we started working on our calibration, and it just didn't work. We just kept we kept trying, and it didn't work. And that's where you just kind of have to keep running through, and you try new things, and you pivot. But we've had other ones in those other spaces as well. On the reimbursement side, there were certain billing codes that we had identified as being suitable, right? And medical billing is a somewhat opaque subject. It seems to be that you can talk to 3 different people. They all have different opinions, and they might all be right, which makes it very difficult to get clarity. And so we had an initial strategy around how we were going to approach reimbursement, and then we wound up speaking to somebody that had more in-depth knowledge about this space and the billing side of it. And they said, "Oh no, these codes, you can't put these together. This won't work," right? And that's a big deal for us. But it so we start looking at other ways to do it, and you just have to look for those other potential pathways to get through. And so we ended up identifying, actually, it is so there's the type of therapy that we're doing. There are examples of it actually in ophthalmology for ocular melanoma treatments. And so we end up following a reimbursement pathway similar to that, and that's going to work for us. So some of it's just perseverance, getting creative, always looking for a way, but that, I would say, those pivots, and that's a big part of what it is to be on this path.
Thanks, Dave. Cathy?
Oh gosh, I'm with these guys. We could be here for the next 2 weeks talking about everything that's gone wrong. But one of the things, and I wanted to talk about this because I think it's so important for early stage entrepreneurs and innovators, and that is there's this perceived tension between your going up the academic promotion ladder and working on innovation. And a good example is, when do I publish? So one of my worst setbacks back in the early days of being clueless, I didn't understand the need to vet sources. I didn't even understand. I love that you said you didn't know what an NDA was. I didn't know there was an NDA when I started with this stuff. And so I talked to the wrong people. And you know what? My product did really well when they put it out on the market. So that was one of the biggest setbacks, is not understanding that I was, working hard to be promoted. And so I was publishing, I was out there conversing and talking, and I didn't understand where the line was and what was a good thing to talk about in public and what was a bad thing to talk about in public. So I think that was one of the harshest lessons I learned, that your ideas can be stolen very quickly. So getting that invention disclosure in, getting to CU Innovations, to this program, and really understanding the rules can be immensely helpful. And I wish that would have been available back in the day. And it also is a way to balance that perception that there is a tension between being promoted and being an innovator, because there really isn't. You just have to be a little more delicate than you might be otherwise. So.
Thanks, Cathy. I'd love to double click on that. And following up on one of the questions from the audience, how much time per week do you spend on innovations versus your day job? And how do you try to balance it all?
I've stopped counting. It's just better that way. And it depends. I think because we are academicians and innovators at the same time, there are so many beautiful ways you can meld your work as an innovator into the classroom, into your research labs, into the work of your students and your postdocs and what have you, that can take some of the burden off, particularly in the early stages. There is a reality that at some point you do have to make decisions about how deeply you want to align. If you want to do an actual startup and you want to be the CEO or the chief scientific officer of a company, then that does cause you to have to make some decisions, I think, about where your time is going to be spent. But generally, at least particularly in this early stage, it seems to work out. None of us work 40 hours a week. So that, at least that I know, and if you do, I want to know your secret. So I would, it's hard to judge. Outside of work, probably 10 to 15 hours a week right now. So I don't know.
Malik?
Yeah. So if you go back maybe 10 years ago, my answer used to be that I was 100% clinical and 100% research, that I was figuring out a way to do all things, which I would not recommend, especially to the students or residents who might be listening in. That was a huge mistake. I was traveling all the time. A lot of things suffered. And slowly, especially when the pandemic started, my thought process around how I was splitting my time changed significantly. We have a tremendous amount of support on campus, and I think it's really important to say that. So my chairman, Naresh Mandava, has always been supportive. From the first startup package that he gave me when he hired me 20 years ago, he said, I'm going to support you as long as you go after those unmet needs. I think with Dean Sampson and with Chancellor Elliman, they set the tone for the campus to know that it's part of our mandate to innovate, to bring new products to the patient. So we're given that room, that space to maybe step away a little bit from clinic. You still have to be in clinic, and at least for me, and in surgery, because that in some ways is where the initial innovation is born, right? One of my mentors, Dave Epstein, who's since passed away, used to say that the clinic is your laboratory. That's where you actually learn how to answer questions. So it's necessary to do that, but it's also necessary to take care of yourself and to not try and do 100% of both. And I think we have a very supportive campus to do that. If you have an idea and you can figure out the pathway, our leadership gives us that space to do things. And that's what I'm taking advantage of right now.
Do you need to start with an idea to be an innovator entrepreneur, or do you need to train yourself as one first?
I saw that question. I thought it was a really good question in the chat. I'll answer really quickly, and then I'll throw it maybe to David. So from my standpoint, I started off with an idea. I did not know what the innovation pathway is, and innovation is, a word that could mean different things to different people. And then I took that and I started learning how to do patents, what does a 510K even mean, David, right? Didn't know that, didn't know what a PMA was, didn't know what an IDE was. All of these things that you learn along the way. Now, that's not to say that you can't do it the other way. If you have a passion for changing the way that clinical practice or surgical practice is done, then you can start taking courses, you can do webinars, you can read books. But if you don't have something that is addressing an unmet need, then it's really just kind of expanding your horizon from an educational standpoint. You need something that you're betting on so that it actually is something tangible, something you can wrap your arms around in order to implement that learning in a way that does what we're trying to do, which is impact the patient.
Yeah, no, that's there's a lot to this one for sure. I think innovation, I believe is sort of ingrained in research when you're talking about applied science, and medicine is very much an applied science. I think for me, my mentor in graduate school, he was a serial entrepreneur. He invented several things that he brought to market, and it impacted patients very broadly. And so I really learned that as being, how you go from an idea, a simulation, a model, something that you've developed in your lab or on your computer, to actually having that real world impact. So I think I did learn it that way, and that does give me that mindset. At the same time, I would say OncoPatch really started out as an idea at the Colorado School of Mines. So Fred Sarrazin, who's actually the chair of the physics department there, he had been looking at making some somewhat exotic radioactive materials using the reactor they have in Lakewood. And one of the applications, there were some papers around it that was potentially skin cancer, and this went back, several decades. And so so there is that component, there is that spark of the idea that that then you build on as you start to look at it and say, exactly, is there an unmet need? Is this something that people want? And so Fred had actually reached out to our chairman, so Brian Kavanaugh, who's also been incredibly supportive of me personally and this project. So definitely want to shout out to him as well. But we start developing that, and then in reality, that was actually our first Spark grant, our first award. That was sort of the mandate, was actually to explore that and understand, is that something that people want. And so as part of our first Spark Award, we actually worked with an independent market research consultant, and her group basically did blinded interviews. They went out and talked to a bunch of dermatologists and helped us to gather that data to understand, is there actually a market for this, or is this something we think is cool because we're physicists, right? And so I feel like both pathways, or both starting points, are valid, and they're viable pathways along the journey. But I do think that, for me anyway, I do think that the innovation pathway is just intrinsic to what we're doing on this campus, and so it's a great way to really drive impact and have your work reach patients. And yeah, that's what I think.
Thanks. And Cathy, a question for you. In the realm of non-biomedical interventions and the work that you're doing with I-Corps, just to continue with Dave's comment on customer discovery, can you talk a little bit about how that kind of activity and asking questions can help the non-biomedical kinds of technologies in terms of moving to patient impact?
Absolutely. And I would argue that if you've changed any practice behavior in your working group, you're an innovator. Okay, so just keep that in mind. We all innovate at different times. But I'll give a great example. We're working with a group right now who work with construction industry, and they have developed an amazing mental health training package. So that's not a biomedical discovery in and of itself. It's in essence an educational curriculum. And they are doing a fantastic job with that. But through customer discovery, through the I-Corps program, they were able to really go in and fine tune their thinking and their product so that they actually have a viable product that can go to market. And so it doesn't have to be an injectable. It doesn't have to be a cancer treatment. It can be lots and lots of things. And when you think about clinical practice writ large, which is something I do a lot, clinical practice has to do with that very real hands-on. And sometimes it isn't a medical device. Sometimes it's the ecosystem surrounding folks who are struggling in some way or another that our innovations can really make a difference with. So I highly encourage, if you have an idea, all of these ideas are equally important, whatever we're doing. So I would encourage that process.
Great. To the panel, what advice would you give for trainees and postdocs, those are coming into sort of the biomedical healthcare research space? What advice would you give yourself 20, 30 years ago?
Run was the first thing that I thought of, and so the pathway is long, the journey is long, and as you can see from some of the answers, sometimes painful, but the wins are considerable, and when you have them, it makes everything worth it. And one thing that can help you win more often is to have the right network. So I'm going to go back to that statement. So for students, residents, young faculty that are just starting out, seek mentors and seek skill sets that are different than your own and meet with them frequently. Mentorship is a skill set that not everybody has, so you have to choose the right mentors. And one thing that's really important is proximity. It's really important to be close to your mentor so you can meet frequently and have those interactions. It's not going to be as easy to have, a mentor in Asia versus having somebody in Denver that you can interact with. So if I just had one piece of advice, it would be get your Rolodex to expand, but most residents and students probably don't know what a Rolodex is at this point. So just, get names and phone numbers and emails, and don't be afraid to contact people. On this webinar is my fellow from last year, Safe. I just saw his name and messaged him. He joined me after a cold email. And I answered it because it was the right kind of email and it was very articulate, and he had a value, proposition for our team. And he ended up being our clinical fellow, and he's now faculty in Chicago. So don't be afraid to reach out. Good things can happen from just reaching out. And the worst thing that can happen is the person won't reply. So I say, go for it.
And what kind of opportunities are there for postdocs and trainees? Like, how can they get engaged?
Did you want me to answer that, or? Yep.
Or to the panel?
Yeah, I'll just say briefly. So we need skill sets along every level of experience. Students have a lot of vigor, have a lot of energy. Postdocs, same way. Maybe not as much as the students earlier in their experience. And then faculty members can bring the clinical expertise and sort of the know-how, but you need all levels. So I think everybody who's interested shouldn't think of their skill set as maybe not being as important. Every player has a role in this journey.
Dave, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think one of the things that I would say has emerged as being a key to a lot of this is just a focus on execution. Move as quickly as possible to a working model, a prototype, something that will take your idea and get it into a form where you can really start to evaluate it, because along the way you learn a tremendous amount. And on some level, one of the most valuable resources that all of us have is time. And so, it's kind of a saying in this world of, fail fast or succeed. And I think that's exactly right. If it's not going to be a thing, if it's not going to be a good idea, like, you just want to learn that early, and then you'll have time, you can move on to something else. But I think that's been one of the things that that I try to remember in this, and I find that I carry that more in my clinical job, in my day job at the hospital as well. It's just execute, move things forward. That's something that I would encourage people.
Great. I'd like to pull in one last question from Mary Halloran from the chat. Given the marketing success of Shingrix vaccine through GSK, is selling the innovation typically the end goal of most innovations that are developed? If so, when does that typically happen? And I'll add to this, is selling a technology your motivation for moving something forward?
Now that's the important question, right? So I'll start off. We live in the real world, and without financing, without a true value proposition, things typically don't move forward. You said something that's key. Is it always the motivation? No. Sometimes it's not, but the overwhelming majority of times you have to have a value proposition in order to get the financing and then have it reach the patient. It's not going to reach the patient if it doesn't have some sort of financial value proposition, and then a reimbursement pathway, which I think David mentioned earlier is a huge thing that we don't talk about as much early on, but certainly do that now. Is there a pathway to getting reimbursed and the company actually being able to survive? So from that standpoint, when we start off with new ideas, we map out the value proposition both for the patient as well as financially to make sure that we can secure the funding to get to the patient. And I'll stop there and maybe throw it to Cathy because she hasn't had a chance to comment in a bit.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is a really important question because I've seen, particularly at the I-Corps level, I've seen so many faculty get bogged down in this, the ethical demands of all of this. And I think that I love the idea of the value proposition for the patient and for the product. I think that's super important. And I think it's really important to ask more questions. If I had any advice around any of this, is to keep asking questions. We do it all the time and we respect that very much when we're doing research, but for some reason when we get to entrepreneurial work, we kind of back off a little bit as academics and we don't want to ask the questions. And I would encourage that to be a huge, huge option because that helps you to understand how you can help your patients at the end of the day. And it's so important to ask all of those questions.
Great. I know we're reaching the end of our time. There's a few other questions around how can we get started and engaged. I know the team will put it in the chat here. Our opening page for the HIE Impact Initiative and a QR code here for those who are interested in following up and getting more information about engaging either through invention disclosures or idea disclosures. I want to engage, I want to participate. Please reach out to us. We'd be happy to engage and have a conversation. With that, I want to thank all the panelists, Cathy, David, Malik. Your insights are very valuable and we appreciate your time and participation here. Thanks again to Dean Sampson, who's still on the call, and also to Chancellor Don Elliman as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.